Stop for just a moment. Before anything else, just stop. Because there is something in your chest right now that I want to talk about. Not quite pain, not quite peace. Something in between, the feeling of a life that is real but not yet fully inhabited. You know the one. The version of you that moves through the world with something the current version of you is still reaching for. Clarity, steadiness, a quality of presence that does not need to announce itself. You have touched it, in rare moments when a word you spoke landed heavier than you intended. When a decision felt so right that doubt dissolved before it could even form. Those moments are not accidents, they are contact points, glimpses of the version God finished designing before you drew your first breath. Complete, uncompromised, fully formed. And here is the thing I need you to understand today. That version is not ahead of you. It is inside you. The wilderness you walked through was not punishment, it was excavation. Every layer of false identity that fell away made room for what was always true. Every loss that felt like setback was clearing ground for what actually belongs. Today, not someday, not after the next season, not when you finally feel ready today. I want to give you the clearest map you have ever held of exactly who God prepared you to be, and how, starting right now, you begin to walk as that person. Stay with me. Before we go any further, let me tell you what is waiting for you if you stay through everything I am about to share. By the end of this, you will know exactly what the God-prepared version of you looks like, not in vague, general terms, but specifically in a way you can recognize and name. You will understand why the seasons that broke you were not detours. You will have two real, practical tools you can use, starting today. And, near the end, I am going to share something that has genuinely helped me hold this kind of alignment in my own daily life. Stay with me through all of it. What comes later matters as much as what comes now. Now, before I give you the map, I want to do something first. I want to tell you what I think is already happening in your life, because I believe this message found you at a specific moment, and that moment has markers. The first one, the things that used to hold your attention, the distractions, the conversations, the habits that filled the quiet, they are starting to lose their grip. Not dramatically, just quietly. Like a channel you used to watch that no longer feels like it belongs to you. The second, the questions you are asking yourself are getting deeper. Not more anxious, deeper. Less, what should I do next, and more, who am I actually becoming? That shift in the quality of your questions is not confusion, it is maturity. The third, you are finding it harder to stay in spaces that are not authentic. Relationships, situations, versions of yourself that once felt comfortable are starting to feel like clothing that does not fit. Not painful, exactly, just wrong. Like something in you has quietly outgrown the container. The fourth, there is something approaching that you cannot yet name. Not a specific event, more like a pressure in the atmosphere around your life. A sense that something is on the other side of a door that has not opened yet. You have been feeling this for weeks, maybe months, and you have not been able to explain it to anyone. And the fifth, and this one matters most. The stories you used to tell yourself about why things happened the way they did are starting to feel incomplete. Their authority is fading. Something in you knows there is a larger frame, and you are ready to see it. These are not random feelings. These are markers. There is a seed, and inside that seed, from the very first day it exists underground, is the complete blueprint of the tree it is becoming. The tree does not build itself from scratch. It does not acquire its design as it grows. The design was always there, always whole, always waiting. The seed's entire journey underground is not construction, it is activation. The right combination of warmth and pressure and moisture causes what was always inside to begin to emerge. What you are feeling right now, that pull, that growing intolerance for what is not authentic, that pressure you cannot name, those are the conditions of activation. Something that has been inside you from the beginning is beginning to unfold. And today, I want to help you see what that thing actually is. Here is the first truth. There is a version of you that has been running your life, and it is not the one God prepared. Before that lands the wrong way, I need to be very clear. This is not a statement of shame, it is a statement of grace, because the version of you that has been managing your life was not chosen out of weakness, it was built out of survival. And that is crucial to understand. Think about where you were formed. The environments, the family systems, the relationships, the rooms where you first learned what was safe to be and what was not. In those environments, certain parts of you were welcomed and certain parts were not. And you, being intelligent, being adaptive, learned to lead with the parts that were accepted and to quiet the parts that were not. Over time, that adaptation became an identity. The first layer of this version, and most chosen ones recognize, this one is what I would call the approval version. The part of you that has learned to read the room before you fully enter it. That modifies what it says based on who is listening. That has become so practiced at adjusting to what others need that it has almost forgotten what it actually thinks. The approval version is not a liar. It is a person who learned that being read was safer than being truly known. The second layer is the safe version. This is the part that has learned to keep your gifts at a volume that does not disturb. That leads with enough to be seen, but not so much that it threatens. If you have ever been mid-conversation and felt yourself consciously pull back an insight that felt too sharp, soften a perception that felt too clear, that was the safe version, protecting you from the vulnerability of being fully seen. The third layer is more subtle. I call it the capable but not too much version. This version succeeds, genuinely succeeds, but maintains a ceiling, achieves enough to feel legitimate, but stops just before the territory that would require full exposure. There is a line just beyond where you currently operate, and every time you approach it, something in you finds a reason to step back. That is not fear of failure. That is the survival version protecting you from the risk of fully becoming what you were made for. And the fourth layer, the most familiar in this season of your life, is the waiting until ready version. This is the version that has convinced you there is one more thing to learn, one more confirmation needed, before you can step fully into who you were designed to be. This version will always find one more reason to wait, because readiness, the way it defines it, never fully arrives. Now, I want you to hear something about Joseph. When they threw him into the pit, he was not living as the man who would stand before Pharaoh and speak with the authority of heaven. He was surviving, managing, doing what you do when the ground has dropped out from beneath you. The pit was not his design, but it was embedded in his preparation. And for years after, through slavery, through prison, through seasons that made no sense from the outside, he kept showing up as a version of himself that was not yet the full picture. Not because he was failing, because the full version requires conditions that have not yet arrived. But here is what we often miss in Joseph's story. The pit did not create his identity. It was being formed in him the entire time. The version God prepared was present before the pit. The pit just revealed what he was made of. A seed that never breaks open is preserved, but it is also never the tree. The false version of you preserved something real. It kept you alive through environments that were not safe for the full version. But you no longer live in that season. And choosing to remain in a shelter after the storm has completely passed is not wisdom. It is confinement. So who is the version God actually prepared? Let me get specific, because this is the moment most messages stop at generalities. You are enough. Your time is coming. God has a plan. And while those things are true, they are not specific enough to change the way you actually live. So, let me give you architecture. Let me describe what this version looks like in practice. The first quality the God-prepared version carries. It is a cycle breaker, and what this means is not dramatic. It does not mean you will stand on a platform and declare freedom over your bloodline in front of an audience. What it means is that you move through the world quietly, ending patterns that have run through your family, your relationships, your environment for a very long time. Things that others accepted as simply the way things are, you cannot accept. Not because you are difficult, because something in you knows they were never supposed to continue. And you were placed exactly where you were placed to be the one who stops them. The second quality. This version is a truth carrier. It cannot inhabit inauthenticity for long without cost. You have probably felt this. Conversations where the version of events was slightly adjusted to serve a more comfortable narrative, and something in you registered it, almost physically. A kind of internal friction that others around you seemed not to feel. That is not oversensitivity. That is a God-given intolerance for what is false. You carry truth not by exposing everyone around you, but by being the person whose simple presence makes dishonesty uncomfortable in a room. The third quality. This version is a light bearer. And I want to say carefully what this means. It does not mean you are the most charismatic person in the room. It does not mean you carry the loudest presence. What it means is that something in you is settled in a way that changes the atmosphere around you, not because you are performing anything, but because something in you is at rest. And rest, in a world of anxious striving, is extraordinary. The fourth quality. This version is a seer. Not in a mystical sense alone, though there is genuinely something spiritual here, but in a very practical one. You perceive things before they arrive. You read patterns that others miss. You see through the surface of situations to what is actually happening underneath. This has probably gotten you in trouble. People have called it overthinking, anxiety, suspicion. What they were actually describing was precision, a gift so finely tuned that it registered the signal before anyone else could hear it. The fifth quality. This version is a spiritual warrior. And I need you to understand this clearly, because it has nothing to do with aggression. A spiritual warrior is the person who does not collapse under pressure, who shows up even when everything is against them with a steadiness that cannot be explained by circumstances alone. You have been this. In seasons where you had every right to fall apart, you held. In moments where the ground shifted, something in you found a place to stand. That was not willpower. That was the God-prepared version holding ground that it was built to hold. Let me ask you quietly, which of those landed differently? One of them, maybe more than one, created a recognition. Not of something new, of something you already knew but had not heard named out loud before. That recognition is important. Hold it. David was anointed king while he was still a shepherd. After the oil was poured over his head, after something sacred had transferred, he went back to the field, back to the sheep, back to the ordinary. The anointing did not immediately change his circumstances. It changed the way he inhabited himself within those circumstances. David did not become king in the palace. He became king in the wilderness, practicing being who God said he was, before the title, before the throne, before anyone confirmed it. You were anointed before anyone brought you into the room. The question is not whether the God-prepared version of you is real. It is. The question is, what is standing between you and living from it consistently? I want to name two things, not to shame you, to disarm them. Because things that are named lose power over you. The first is this: stepping into the version God prepared feels like presumptuousness, not consciously. Underneath, there is a voice, very quiet, very persistent, that says, who are you to carry yourself as a cycle breaker, a truth carrier, a light bearer? What if you step fully into this and it turns out you were wrong about yourself? I want you to hear this clearly. That voice is not humility. Humility is accurate self-assessment. It says, I am exactly who God says I am, no more and no less. What that voice is doing is something different. It is keeping you small by disguising the cage as virtue. A chosen one who believes that fully inhabiting their own God-designed identity is presumptuous will stay in the shelter forever, not out of faithfulness, but out of fear, dressed as deference. The second thing, the false version, for all its limitations, feels safe. It has a history. The people in your life know it. Relationships have been calibrated around it. And releasing it, stepping out of the identity that has organized your world, involves something nobody talks about in these conversations. Grief. Real grief. Because parts of that version carried you through very real seasons, and there is something that deserves to be honored before it can be fully released. You are allowed to grieve the old version. You are allowed to acknowledge what it cost you and what it did for you. That grief is not weakness. It is the evidence of something real being laid down. You can honor what kept you alive in the storm without choosing to live inside the shelter for the rest of your life. What I want to show you next changes everything. There is a truth about your formation, about everything you walked through, that reframes all of it. And once you see it, you will not be able to unsee it. Here is the third truth. And this one is going to shift something in you if you let it land. Everything you walked through, the delays, the losses, the seasons where nothing seemed to move, the moments where you felt like you were falling behind a timeline that everyone else was on track with, none of it was delaying the version God prepared. It was building it. I need you to let that actually settle, not just pass over it as a comforting phrase, because the seasons that felt like punishment were not detours from the design. They were embedded in the design from the beginning. And what was being forged in you during those wilderness years was not just patience. It was not character in some vague, general sense. It was 4 very specific things that could not have been developed any other way. The first thing forged in the wilderness: discernment. Real discernment, the ability to tell the difference between what is true and what only sounds true, between what is from God and what is from fear, between who is genuinely for you and who is performing. It does not come from study. It comes from experience. It comes from the times you trusted the wrong thing and felt it. From the moments when what looked like the right door turned out to be a wall dressed as an entrance. Every one of those experiences deposited something in you that a person who has never walked through difficulty simply does not have. You paid for that discernment, and it is yours permanently. The second thing, rootedness, the kind of steadiness that does not move when the ground moves. You cannot develop this in comfortable seasons. Rootedness. Real rootedness only forms when you have nothing external to hold on to, and you discover that something internal holds anyway. When the relationships dissolved, when the plan fell apart, when the season extended far beyond what felt reasonable or fair, and you were still standing, still here. That is not stubbornness. That is a root system going down into something deeper than circumstance. The third thing, compassion that does not lose itself. There is a specific quality in people who have carried pain long enough to transform it. They can hold others in their suffering without being consumed by it. They can be present in someone else's darkness without drowning in it. This is not a personality trait you are born with. It gets forged in a very specific way. You had to carry your own weight long enough and find that it did not crush you before you could build the capacity to carry the weight of others without losing your footing. That is not common, and it is not small. The fourth thing, and this one is perhaps the quietest of all, the ability to hold others in their becoming. Because someone or something held you in yours. Because you know from the inside what it feels like to be in the middle of a formation that makes no sense yet. You know what it is to need someone present who does not try to fix it or rush it, who simply says, I know what this is. I know what it is becoming. That knowing, that specific, experiential knowing, is a gift that could only have come from walking through exactly what you walked through. Now let me give you a picture of this. Scientists who study the metamorphosis of a butterfly discovered something that genuinely startled them. Inside the chrysalis, that sealed, quiet, dark place, the caterpillar does not gradually grow wings. What actually happens is this: the caterpillar dissolves completely into what biologists call imaginal soup, a liquid, formless, unrecognizable state. Everything it was gets broken down to almost nothing, and from that formlessness, the cells that were always there, the ones that always carried the blueprint of the butterfly, begin to organize, begin to build. The wings that emerge are not new, they were coded into the creature from the beginning. The dissolution was not the enemy of the butterfly. It was the mechanism of its becoming. What you called falling apart was reorganization. What you called losing yourself was the false version dissolving so the prepared version could take form. I am not going to tell you that every painful moment had a clean and traceable purpose. That would not be honest, and you deserve honesty more than you deserve comfort. Pain is real. Loss is real. Some things that happened to you were genuinely unjust, and I hold that with you. But within the formation, underneath the surface of every season, something was being activated that could not have been activated any other way. The version God prepared was not delayed by your wilderness. Your wilderness was always part of its design, and now I want to give you the truth that recontextualizes everything. Today is not the beginning. That is the thing most people miss. They hear a message like this and they think, this is my starting point. This is where I begin becoming who I was made to be. And I want to gently but clearly push back on that. You have been moving toward the God-prepared version your entire life. Every step, every season, every moment of formation. All of it was movement, even when it felt like standing still, even when it felt like going backward. You were always moving. Which means today is not where the journey starts. Today is where you recognize that you have already arrived at the threshold. There is a word in the ancient scriptures for this kind of moment. The Greeks called it kairos, and kairos is different from ordinary time, which the Greeks called chronos, one moment simply following another in sequence. Kairos is the appointed moment, the convergence point, the moment when what was being prepared meets the conditions that can finally receive it. When the seed and the soil and the light and the warmth all arrive together and what was always inside begins to unfold. This is a kairos moment. Not because the calendar changed, not because your circumstances are perfect, they may not be, not because you have finished all the preparation. Kairos moments do not wait for perfect conditions. They are appointed, and something in you, something that responded to this message, that felt that pull at the very beginning, that has been carrying that unnamed pressure for weeks, is already telling you that this is the moment. The seed does not decide one morning to become a tree. There is no act of will from the seed. There is a moment triggered by exactly the right convergence of conditions when what was always inside begins to emerge, not because it earned it, not because it finally figured everything out, because it was always going to happen at this moment. The timing was encoded before the seed ever went into the ground. You are not too late. You are not behind. You are not still being prepared for something that has not arrived yet. You arrived in this exact moment, exactly on time. And the shift that needs to happen, the fundamental posture shift, is this. Stop trying to become the God-prepared version of you and start recognizing that you already are that person. Not as spiritual bypassing, not as wishful thinking, as a factual reorientation, because becoming implies you are not yet there. And recognition says, this is already true. I am stepping into what was always true about me, not becoming, inhabiting, not achieving, receiving. So, let me give you something real to do with this. The first practice I want to leave with you is what I call identity declaration, and I want to be clear about what this is not. This is not affirmations. Affirmations speak over a gap. They say, I am confident, while the body tells a different story, hoping repetition will eventually change the reality. What I am describing is different. Declaration speaks what is already true. It is alignment, not construction. Here is what this looks like. Sometime today, and this does not require you to go anywhere or do anything elaborate, just pause wherever you are. Take one slow breath, and let these 3 statements land in your body, either spoken aloud or held firmly in your own mind. I carry truth that I will not compromise. I end patterns that were never supposed to continue through me. I hold light without needing to announce it. That is 30 seconds, not to build an identity from scratch, to re-inhabit the one that was always there. As you sit with those 3 statements, notice which one creates the most resonance, the most friction of recognition. That is the one to stay with a moment longer. That is the one the prepared version of you most needs you to receive right now. The second practice is a decision filter. Simple, but it changes everything if you actually use it. Before a significant response or choice, ask yourself one question. Is this coming from the prepared version of me or the survival version? The prepared version makes decisions that feel true rather than safe, that align with calling rather than approval, that hold even when no one is watching. The survival version makes decisions that protect the shelter, that keep the peace at the cost of authenticity, that minimize the risk of exposure. The question takes 3 seconds. The answer, consistently chosen, compounds over time in ways you cannot yet see, but will eventually be unmistakable. Now, before I move into closing, there is one more thing I want to share, and I want to say it the way I would say it to someone I genuinely care about, not as a commercial, but as something I came across that supports exactly the kind of inner work we have been doing together today. One of the things that keeps people from living as the prepared version of themselves, even after they recognize who that version is what happens in the brain. Because the survival version has been running your neural pathways for years. The approval version, the safe version, the waiting until ready version, these are not just habits of thought. They are literally grooved into the architecture of how your brain processes the world. And what helps the prepared version actually hold what creates the neurological ground for identity work to take root is a specific brainwave state. Neuroscientists call it gamma. And here is something most people have never been told. Children under 7 years old have gamma firing almost continuously. That is why young children learn with effortless speed, why they are intuitive, creative, and present in a way that most adults have long since lost access to. Around age 7, something researchers call the decline effect begins. The pressures of the educational system, the overstimulation of modern life, the chronic low-grade stress of simply growing up, they begin to suppress gamma. And most adults, without knowing it, are thinking and deciding and perceiving from brainwave states that simply do not have access to the full clarity and intuition that were available to them as children. God-given capacity, quiet now. Dr. Robert Lake, a neuroscientist with 34 years of experience, and research validated by institutions including MIT, Harvard, and Princeton, spent years developing a reliable way to restore gamma activation. The traditional clinical method requires biofeedback sessions at $300 an hour, or home equipment that costs $7,000. Dr. Lake compressed that same technology into a 7-minute audio track. You put on headphones, you close your eyes, you listen. Nothing more is required, no meditation practice, no months of discipline. The brain entrainment technology embedded in the track does the work, meeting your brain where it is and guiding it back toward the frequency it was always designed to operate from. The standard price for this track is $49. But for anyone watching this video specifically, Dr. Lake has made it available at $39, a price that does not exist on Amazon or anywhere else online, only through this video. And with that, you also receive 4 additional resources at no extra cost. a separate audio track designed to help children activate focus and natural confidence. The original book that the film The Secret drew its inspiration from, a book that sells for $20 on Amazon, included here at no charge, a guided visualization for 4 areas of life, and a 5-habit framework you can print and keep somewhere visible. All of it is backed by a 100% money-back guarantee, with no limit on how many times you have used it before requesting a refund. You risk absolutely nothing. One thing I do want to say clearly: there are imitation products circulating under the Genius Song name that do not contain the actual brain entrainment technology. They are audio files, but they are not embedded with the frequency work that makes this effective. The only way to receive the genuine product, with all 4 bonuses and the full guarantee, is through the link I have placed in the description of this video and in the pinned comment below it. Please do not search for it elsewhere. If what we talked about today resonates, if you feel ready to give the prepared version of you every support you can, I have left that link where you can find it. Now, I want to close this the way it deserves to be closed, not with a summary, with a blessing. Take one breath before anything else. Let it be slow. Let it be deliberate. Let it be a small act of receiving, because you have been giving so much for so long that receiving can feel unfamiliar. Before you return to the day, I want to honor something. I want to honor the version of you that survived, the approval version, the safe version, the waiting until ready version. That version of you was not a failure. It was a protector. It kept something precious alive through seasons that were genuinely hard. And it deserves to be honored, not carried forward, but honored. So let yourself hold this for just a moment, wherever you are. Thank you. You protected me when I needed it. The storm has passed. I no longer need the shelter. I am ready to step into the open. And now let me speak to the version that is stepping forward. You, chosen one, are a cycle breaker. You end what was never meant to continue, not through force, but through the simple, powerful act of being who you fully are. You are a truth carrier. You hold an intolerance for what is false. That is not a flaw, it is a calling. You are a light bearer. The atmosphere shifts when you are fully present in it, not because of anything you perform, but because of what you carry at rest. You are a seer. The perception you have carried your entire life, the one that has been called too much, too sensitive, too aware, is precision. And it belongs to the prepared version. You are a spiritual warrior. You hold ground. You do not collapse. And the rootedness in you goes deeper than you have yet discovered, deeper than even the hardest season was able to reach. This is who God prepared. The seed has broken open. Not because you finally earned it, not because everything is perfectly in place, because this is the moment, the kairos, when what was always inside you is ready to emerge, what was coded into you before you drew your first breath, what the wilderness was building without your permission, what the dissolution was always reorganizing toward. It is here, not someday, not when the circumstances finally confirm it. Not when the people around you recognize it before you do. Now, starting today, beginning in this exact breath. This is not who God wants you to become eventually. This is who God prepared you to be. And starting today, starting right now, you walk in it.